All right, in this video, we are going to learn how to read a piecewise function. Okay, so you read a graph just like you would the page of a book. You're going to read it from the left side to the right side. Coming in from the left, you are talking about coming in from the left of your x-axis. So the x-axis goes from negative infinity to positive infinity. We're going to talk about increasing, decreasing, and constant intervals. So when I'm coming in from the left side of this graph, here is where I'm going to come and start hitting the graph. You'll notice that values on that particular piece of the graph are going down. So that is going to be a decrease section. Once I get to this point right here, you'll notice that the graph goes straight left and right, or straight to the right. It's horizontal. That is going to be called a constant because all of the y's on that piece right there are the same. Once I hit this point, you'll notice now you're in this piece of the graph and your values are going up, which means that's going to be an increasing section. So on these problems, I like to first of all go through and enter exactly what is happening on each piece. Then I go to everywhere that changes direction. So these points where it came in from I decreased until I got to this particular point, I like to say what its x coordinate is because the intervals on increasing, decreasing, and constant are always going to use the x coordinate because you're reading it like a book from the left side to the right side. So this one's x coordinate would be negative 4. So then I'm constant until I get to this change of directions. And here's my origin. So its x coordinate is positive 4. So you'll notice the first question is asking where you are increasing. When you're increasing and decreasing, you do not ever use brackets because you're going to use parentheses around all of the things, even the infinities, the numbers, everything, because those points are actually a change in direction. They are not part of one piece or the other. So my increase is going to be this part right here. So from 4 to infinity. So from 4 to infinity. Okay, now let's see where I am decreasing. Here is the part that is decreasing. It decreases until it gets to that negative 4. So it starts at negative infinity. And it goes down until it gets to the negative 4. And the last piece that we're going to talk about is that piece in the middle that is the constant piece. So the constant interval is this piece right here. That's why I like to label the x coordinates of those change in direction points. So that way, once you've labeled everything, you don't have to worry about accidentally using a y coordinate instead of an x coordinate. So this constant piece is going to be from negative 4 to positive 4. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on this next example. I am going to go through first and label what is happening on each piece. So this first little piece coming in from, remember you go from the left to the right, negative infinity to positive infinity. So here's where I'm going to start. This little tiny piece right here is constant. Then this next piece, the values are going up, so that's an increase. The next piece I'm going to run into is this one, and if the values are going down here, and then the very last piece would be increasing. So on this one, when I'm asked to label the increasing sections, there's actually two of them. I'm talking about this section and this section. Now, remember, what I want to do is use x coordinates. So let's see, the x coordinate of where this point right here, where it starts that increase, will be negative 6. And this one's x coordinate where it stops the increase, its x coordinate is 0. Here's another where it starts an increase. That one's x coordinate is 5. And then it increases until it gets to this last point here, and that one's x coordinate is 8. So you are increasing on two separate intervals. That first one is from -6 to 0. And the second interval where it's increasing is 5 to 8. Now we'll talk about the decreasing. So the decrease starts here, and then it decreases until it gets to that 5. So the starting point of the decrease, its x coordinate is 2. So it decreases from 2 until it gets to 5. So 2 to 5. And the last piece I'm going to talk about is that constant piece. So here's where the constant starts, and it's constant until it gets to that ending point. So the first x coordinate of that constant piece would be -7, and then it's constant until it gets to the -6. So -7 to -6 is where it would be constant. All right, another example talking about increase, decrease, and constant. So again, I'm going to go through and label what's happening on each piece. So starting from the left, starting all the way from -infinity. So here's where I'm starting to run into the graph. So those values are going up. So that's going to be an increase until it gets to this point. And then it's going to go down. So that's going to be a decrease until it gets to this point. And then it's going to go straight across. So this point, this section down here is going to be a constant until it gets to there. It goes up again, so another increase until it gets to this point, and then it's going to be constant again. So now what I'm going to do is go find each of the changing points' x coordinates. So coming in from -infinity, I increase until I get to here. That one's x coordinate is a -8. I decrease until I get to this point. That one's x coordinate is -6. And then I'm constant until I get to the next change of directions. Its x coordinate would be -3 until it gets to the next change of direction, which its x coordinate would be -2. So let's look at the different intervals. My first interval, or we'll talk about the increasing intervals first. I noticed that there are two increases here until I get to that point, and then another increase starts in talking about that piece. So let's name those intervals, which there are two of them. The first increase starts all the way from the left at -infinity until it gets to that first change of direction which is -8. And then there's another increase that starts at -3 and increases until it goes to -2. Now, let's talk about the decreasing. So, going down, here's where it starts to decrease, and it decreases until it gets to that point. Those are the only part of the graph where it's decreasing. So, it starts at -8, and it decreases until it gets to -6. And then the last one that we will talk about will be the constant. So talking constant, starting here, going to that endpoint, and then starting again here and going to the right forever. So my first constant is from -6 to -3. And my second constant interval is from -2 to the right forever to infinity. All right, in this last example, we are going to talk about the increasing and decreasing intervals, but first of all, we're going to talk about relative maximums and relative minimums. Okay, your maximum and minimum values are going to be the y-coordinates of those points, and then they occur at x equals whatever the x coordinate is. So a relative maximum is going to be like at the crest or top of a hill. So we're talking about this point right here, and it tells me what the x and y coordinates of that point are. So the maximum value is whatever the y-coordinate is at the maximum. So its maximum value is -1, and it occurs at x equals -3. The minimum is like at the bottom of the hill. It's going to be the lowest point of an area. So that lowest value, the minimum value, is the y-coordinate, so it's -5, and it occurs at x equals 4. So now I want to go through, I'm going to label what's happening at each section. So remember, we're reading this like a book from the left side to the right. So the first part of the graph that I'm going to come into is this part right here. And here the values are going up until they hit that point. So that's an increase. Then in between the max and the min, here the values are going down. So that's going to be a decrease until it gets to this point, and then the last part is going up. So that's going to be an increase. So talking about the increasing and decreasing intervals. There's 2 increasing intervals. The first one, remember, you're coming in from the left, from -infinity, and you are increasing